My father's voice cut through me like glass. Not just out of this house, out of this family. You are nothing to me. As I remember clearly, it's on Thanksgiving night at the Blackwell estate. The scent of roasted turkey, honey glazed, ham and buttered rolls filled the air as servants moved swiftly between the long mahogany dining table, ensuring that each guest glass remained full. Crystal chandeliers cast golden reflections over polished silverware, and laughter floated from the more distinguished guests, the ones who belonged. I wasn't one of them. I knew it the moment I stepped into the dining hall. My usual place, near the head of the table, next to my sister Victoria, had been reassigned. Instead, my name card sat at the farthest end, near the cousins who still viewed me as some pitiful, wandering disappointment, a deliberate insult. I swallowed the lump in my throat, smoothing my dress before taking my seat. The conversations flowed around me, but I was merely background noise in a house I had once called home. Then my father, Gerald Blackwell, rose from his chair, tapping his glass. The room fell silent. Tonight, he began, his deep voice carrying with authority. We celebrate legacy. His gaze swept across the room, landing on Victoria, the golden child, to Victoria, whose brilliance continues to elevate the Blackwell name. The guests erupted into applause. Victoria beamed, the perfect daughter in every way. Harvard-educated, an investment mogul, engaged to a well-connected attorney, a Blackwell success story. Then, as if on cue, his expression darkened, and his gaze shifted toward me. And then, he said, his voice heavy with contempt, "There's my other Daughter." Knot twisted in my stomach. The shift in the room was palpable. The smiles faded, forks clinked against plates, and a few guests exchanged awkward glances. A woman who had every opportunity at her feet, he continued, but chose to squander them. A woman who hops from job to job, who sees marriage as a casual arrangement rather than a duty, and, perhaps most insulting of all, thinks she can continue the Blackwell name with a stranger's child. I froze. He knew. I had confided in my mother months ago, voicing my thoughts on adoption, a concept Gerald Blackwell found repulsive. He had always insisted that our bloodline was everything, that my duty was to secure the legacy with a biological child. A few whispers trickled down the table. My mother's wine glass remained raised, her expression unreadable. I forced my voice to remain steady. You have no right. The table shook. My father's fist slammed down, rattling the silverware. I have every right. His voice rose, fury surging through every syllable. I raised you. I gave you everything, and you threw it away. You are a leech, a disgrace to this family. Silence. My breath caught in my throat. I searched for one ally. One face that wasn't filled with either pity or disgust. There were none. Then came the final blow. Get out. A hush fell over the room. My father's voice cut through me like glass. Not just out of this house, out of this family. You are nothing to me. The words hit harder than any physical blow. With shaking legs, I rose from the table, my vision blurring as I turned away. As I walked out into the cold Charleston night, I realized I was no longer Eleanor Blackwell. I had been erased. For days after my father erased me, I wandered through life like a ghost. The reality of what had happened, being cast out from the Blackwell family, abandoned by my mother, discarded like I never existed, should have destroyed me. But I had. Lucas, my husband, Lucas Monroe, had always been my safe harbor. He was steady, rational, and fiercely loyal. I had no illusions about his family's wealth and status. The Monroes of Boston were a name that carried just as much weight in elite circles as the Blackwells did in the South. But Lucas had always stood apart from them, never buying into the power plays and backroom deals that defined his mother's world. Surely his family wouldn't betray me, too. Surely I wouldn't lose them, too. I was wrong. It started subtly, the way Evelyn Monroe operated. She never raised her voice. Never insulted me outright. No. Her methods were far more insidious. Death, by 1,000 whispers. The moment the Blackwells disowned me, I became a liability in Evelyn's eyes, a blemish on the Monroe name. The wife of her son should have come from a powerful family, a well-connected background, not some outcast who had been publicly humiliated by her own blood. At first, she was polite. Too polite. She would tilt her head at me, her manicured fingers wrapping delicately around a wine glass, and murmur, "I just worrying about you, dear. It must be so difficult being cast out." Then, the rumors started. She spread them like wildfire through her social circles. That I had been cut off because of financial irresponsibility, that I was unstable, prone to dramatic outbursts, that Lucas had made a mistake marrying someone beneath him. I heard it all secondhand. Friends who once greeted me warmly now hesitated, their smiles brittle. Acquaintances who had once invited me to charity events and luncheons suddenly had scheduling conflicts. I was being erased all over again. Only, this time, it was a slower, more calculated process. Then came the final blow. I had been preparing for a new job, a strategic communications role at a prestigious firm. It wasn't just about financial security. It was about proving I could rebuild myself. Then, one morning, my phone rang. "Eleanor." The recruiter's voice was tight, professional. "I regret to inform you that we're going in a different direction." I felt the blood drain from my face, but I signed the offer. We had a start date, a long silence. Then, in a softer tone, they added, "We're sorry for any inconvenience." Click. I stood there, gripping my phone, numb. A week later, I found out the truth. A friend from the firm pulled me aside at a coffee shop. Her expression a mix of guilt and reluctance. "Eleanor, it was your mother and law." My breath hitched. "She called an executive in HR, told them you were emotionally unstable, that with your situation, you might be a liability." My fingers trembled against the coffee cup. "She made it clear that hiring you would be a mistake." I stared at her, trying to process it. My own husband's mother had sabotaged me. She had stripped away the one thing I had left, a chance to rebuild. Something inside me cracked that day. It wasn't just the job. It was everything. The rejection, the humiliation. The suffocating weight of Evelyn's power, and my father's absence. I spiraled. Weeks passed. My inbox remained empty. Bills piled up. Lucas reassured me we'd be fine. But I felt the weight of dependence pressing down on my chest. People pulled away. Friends stopped returning. My calls, conversations felt strained. I was toxic now. A stain no one wanted to be associated with. Lucas tried to shield me, but Evelyn's influence was everywhere. I saw it in the way people glanced at me. The way job interviews suddenly went in another direction. The way social events suddenly forgot to send me an invitation. It felt like drowning. And every time I tried to surface, Evelyn pressed her foot down harder. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, looking at my own hollowed-out reflection, and for the first time, I truly asked myself, why am I fighting so hard for a seat at their table? Why was I desperate for a family that never wanted me, a father who erased me, a mother who stood by and watched, a mother-in-law who was slowly strangling every opportunity out of my life? I clenched my fists, the anger burning away the grief. If they wanted me gone, I would do the opposite. I wouldn't disappear. I would become impossible to ignore. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the first sparks of an idea formed, a way out. A way forward. If Evelyn Monroe and Gerald Blackwell thought they had crushed me, they were wrong. They had created something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing to lose, and everything to prove. For the first time in my life, I had nothing to lose. I had spent months drowning under the weight of rejection. First from my father, then from my mother-in-law, and finally from the very world that once welcomed me. The doors that had always been open, job opportunities, friendships, even casual invitations, had slammed shut. Evelyn Monroe had ensured that I was socially, professionally, and financially strangled. But what she didn't realize was that by backing me into a corner, She forced me to sharpen my claws. One night, as I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through job listings I would never get, I stumbled upon a thread about self-publishing. Authors who had started with nothing, no connections, no industry backing, had built empires through their words. Some had even done it under pseudonyms. A memory surfaced. One I had buried long ago. When I was a child, I used to write stories. My father, Gerald Blackwell, dismissed them as a silly hobby for girls with no real ambition. Writers don't make money, he had scoffed once, tossing a notebook of mine into the trash. If you want to waste time with fairy tales, do it in private. But now, sitting in my dimly lit apartment, my anger turned into resolve. I opened a blank document and began to type. The words poured out of me. I channeled every ounce of betrayal, humiliation, and fury into my protagonist. A woman cast out by her powerful family, who clawed her way to the top of an empire that once dismissed her. Night after night, I wrote, the pain, the rawness of my experience. It bled into every sentence. I barely ate, barely slept. My fingers ached from typing, but I didn't stop. This wasn't just a book, it was my weapon. I spent weeks studying the self-publishing industry. I learned about Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, the power of algorithm-driven marketing, and the secret to writing highly addictive books. I researched pseudonyms and branding, choosing a name that felt like a rebirth. Raven Montgomery. That was the name I would use, the identity I would build. When I finally hit publish, I felt like I had set a match to my past. I didn't expect much at first, but within weeks, something happened. My book, a gritty revenge thriller filled with betrayal, power, and redemption, began to climb the charts. At first, it was a trickle, a few readers. Then, a popular book blogger featured it in a list titled Fierce Women Who Rise from the Ashes. Sales exploded. 5-star reviews poured in. Readers were obsessed with my protagonist, women who had lived through toxic family expectations, societal judgment, and betrayal saw themselves in her. Within 2 months, my book broke into the top 100 in its genre. Within 6 months, I was making 6 figures. Nobody knew, not Gerald, not Evelyn. Not even Lucas. I built a literary empire in secret, fueled by the very people who tried to destroy me. Success tasted like freedom, but it wasn't enough. My father, despite his uncheckable arrogance, was facing financial struggles. The luxury hotel sector was crumbling, and the Blackwell Hotel Group was bleeding money. I could have walked away, let him drown in his failures. But no, I wanted something more. I wanted control. Using Raven Montgomery's earnings, I began making quiet, strategic investments through a series of anonymous holding companies. I bought shares in the Blackwell Hotel Group, not in my name, of course. I created layers of anonymity, shell corporations, third-party investors, and silent partnerships. Piece by piece, I acquired controlling interest in his most vulnerable property, the Blackwell Grand Hotel. The very business he poured his legacy into was now mine. And he had no idea. One morning, Lucas sat at the kitchen counter, reading the business section of the newspaper. He flipped the page and muttered, "Looks like your father's in trouble." I casually sipped my coffee. "Oh, he's taking on new investors," Lucas continued. "Blackwell Grand is barely staying afloat. Apparently some anonymous firm thus bought a majority stake." My heart pounded. I took another sip of coffee, keeping my voice even. "Really?" Lucas shrugged. "Yeah, they say the new investors might actually save him from bankruptcy." I hid my smile behind my mug. "No, I wouldn't save him. I would make sure he knew that the daughter he erased was the only thing keeping his empire alive. And then, when the moment was right, I would take it all away." Eleanor Blackwell was dead. Raven Montgomery was rising. And soon, Gerald Blackwell and Evelyn Monroe would regret ever trying to bury me. The envelope was crisp, white, and embossed with gold lettering. It was elegant, expensive, just like everything the Blackwells touched. I ran my fingers over the wax seal, the Blackwell family crest pressing into my skin like a phantom wound. Inside, the invitation read, Gerald Blackwell and the Blackwell Hotel Group cordially invite you to the annual Blackwell Foundation Charity Gala, a night of elegance, philanthropy, and legacy. I almost laughed. Legacy. My father, desperate to salvage his empire, was hosting his most prestigious event yet. A carefully curated display of wealth, influence, and power. The guest list would include Wall Street executives, socialites, and reporters from every major media outlet. And somehow, an invitation had been sent to me. A mistake, a cruel joke, an opportunity. For months, I had worked in the shadows, building my secret literary empire, quietly acquiring his business. Now, the moment had come to step into the light. If I played my cards right, this night would not only be my return, it would be his downfall. I picked up my phone and made the first call. I need a team. The woman who entered Lumiere, an exclusive Manhattan boutique, was not the Eleanor Blackwell they had cast aside. A team of stylists draped me in a sleek, custom-made black gown, the fabric hugging my curves like liquid silk. Personal makeup artists sharpened my features. Smoky eyes, sculpted cheekbones, lips painted the color of vengeance. A high-profile PR strategist prepared statements, just in case the press turned their cameras toward me. My attorney reviewed my investments one last time, ensuring my ownership of Blackwell Grand was airtight. When I looked in the mirror, Eleanor was gone. In her place stood Raven Montgomery, self-made, untouchable, and ready to burn the Blackwell dynasty to the ground. The Blackwell Foundation Charity Gala was being held at the Versailles Hotel, a towering beacon of excess in the heart of New York City. As my car pulled up, I saw the flashing lights of photographers, the hum of elite chatter, the distant clinking of champagne glasses. I stepped out, the slit of my gown revealing just enough leg, diamonds glittering at my throat. The crowd turned to look. At first, they didn't recognize me. And then whispers. Wait, isn't that ? I thought she was exiled. Why is she here? And then I saw them. Gerald Blackwell, Evelyn Monroe. My father stood in the center of the room, holding court, wine glass in hand. His smile froze mid-sentence as his eyes landed on me. Beside him, Evelyn's face drained of color. I walked toward them, slow and deliberate, like a storm rolling in. Evelyn was the first to react. She rushed toward me, eyes burning. What are you doing here? She hissed, gripping my arm with perfectly manicured nails. I smirked, peeling her fingers off my skin one by one. I'm here as an investor. The moment their world began to crumble had officially begun. The air in the Versailles Hotel ballroom was thick with wealth, power, and carefully curated social order. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the polished marble floors, the scent of champagne and expensive perfume lingering in the air. The elite of New York's high society moved in effortless conversation, unaware that their night, Gerald Blackwell's night, was about to become one they'd never forget. I stood near the edge of the room, watching, waiting. Then, the host took the stage. The moment had arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special announcement. A ripple of polite curiosity swept through the crowd. One of our key investors is also a best-selling author. I saw Gerald stiffen, his fingers tightening around his wine glass. Meet Raven Montgomery, also known as Eleanor Blackwell. Gasps, whispers. The entire room turned as I stepped forward, the train of my gown trailing behind me like a shadow. Camera flashes ignited like lightning. Gerald's face drained of color. Evelyn looked like she had been slapped. I took the microphone, my voice steady, controlled, deadly. You called me worthless. You erased me. My gaze locked onto my father's. But while you dismissed me, I built something you can never take. Silence. The weight of my words crushed the air. I turned slightly, addressing the crowd now, my voice sharp and precise. For months, the Blackwell Hotel Group has been struggling, desperately seeking investors to salvage its failing properties. I let the words sink in before delivering the final blow. And as of tonight, I own the controlling stake in this business. The silence shattered. The crowd erupted in chaos. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised, cameras flashing. Business executives exchanged shocked glances. Some smirked, amused. At Gerald's very public fall, I saw my father try to speak, his lips moving, but no sound came out. Evelyn grabbed Lucas's arm, as if trying to physically drag him away from me. He shook her off. "I'm staying," he told her, firm, unwavering. My father finally found his voice. "You tricked me." I smiled. "No, I played by the rules you taught me." His face twisted with rage, but there was nothing he could do. I turned away, the sound of his downfall echoing behind me, and walked out of the ballroom untouchable, victorious, and finally, free.